What is up, guys? I am finally bringing you another update on this car. I figured it was high time I do this, and I finally have time to do it. So here we are. This is my 2017 Accord Coupe. We are doing, well, actually, I'm going to kind of explain the difference in the way these clips are going to be recorded for the future. So historically, when I've made these videos, I've done, 10,000 mile increments. So I had one at 10, 20, 30, and 40,000 miles. However, I'm tired of doing that. I don't really want to stick to a schedule with making these videos because it tends to take a little bit for me to, add another 10,000 miles to the car. That could take 6, 7, 8, 9 months, and I really don't want to wait that long in between doing videos on this car. So from now on, we are just going to be doing videos whenever I freaking feel like it, and I'm just going to call them whatever. However, this video, actually, we are about 1 week out from the 2-year anniversary of me purchasing this car, and so that just so happened to line up. But going forward, we're not going to be sticking to any sort of schedule. So anyways, with that out of the way, we're going to be talking about, I only have 2 major things to talk about. One you might have already noticed. We are going to be talking about my new wheels. So it figures that in the last video I was talking about wanting a new set of wheels and saying that I really couldn't afford it at the moment. I was just going to keep my current set, yada yada yada, and just deal with it. Well, I guess the universe was like, you know what, Ryan, if you want some new wheels, you're gonna get them. Because this is when I was still in Houston. I was driving to work one day, and it was about 6 in the morning. It was really dark out, and I was in the right lane on a residential street. This Chevy truck in my left lane, in the lane leftmost to me, decided he was just going to merge right into me. He was just going to get over, not look and whatnot. And so if I wanted to save my car, the car itself, I was going to have to dive into the shoulder of the street. Only problem is that obviously the street had a curb, and so doing that actually completely destroyed my right front wheel. And I'll go ahead and input a clip of what happened. And so obviously that completely destroyed my right front wheel, and since they were kind of an obscure set of wheels, they were Access Sport wheels, I was having a lot of trouble sourcing a replacement wheel, and of course it destroyed the tire. And so at that point I was like, well, you know what, I guess I'll just buy a new set of wheels. And so that's what I did. So these guys are actually NK TFRs. They are 19 by 8.5 with a plus 35 offset, and I've wanted these wheels for a while. I knew these came out a while back, and I really wanted them, but it just, money wasn't lining up. But I didn't really have a choice at this point, so I figured, you know what, screw it, I'll get the wheels I wanted to get from the start. And so they are in this, I guess they call it storm gray, but it's really more silver. But anyways, I just wanted a slight change, color-wise, because I'd always had the gunmetal color wheels, and I was thinking about getting these gray ones, and I actually really like the way it looks. I think it brings just a tiny bit of little more contrast to the car, and of course, the specs of the wheels are a lot better. Given my car is lowered now and stuff, the fitment is pretty on point, and so yeah, I'm really happy with these wheels so far. As for the tires, I went with the Continental Extreme Contact DWS06. These are ultra high performance all-season tires. They're in the 245/40 R19 size, so 10 millimeters wider. However, these wheels are 9.5 inches wide, which is an inch wider than my last set, and so we do have a little bit of stretch going on here. Nothing too crazy. I don't like a ton of tire stretch, but I think a little bit like this looks pretty good, and it also kind of helps the wheels look flush into the fender there. And of course, the most important thing is it helps with rubbing, which it still does do a little bit. I have my rear fenders rolled, so we're all good back there, but the fronts are, factory, and so over really harsh bumps, being at this height, it does tend to rub a tiny bit, and you can actually see on this tire, which used to be in the front, you can see minor signs of it rubbing, but again, it's not cutting into the tire or anything, so nothing bad is happening there. And so yeah, that is the main difference from the last video, is these new wheels, and I think they look pretty badass. Of course, I did have to raise the car a little bit when I put these wheels on, but not by a ton, maybe like 1/8 of an inch, and I think she's sitting pretty much exactly the way I've wanted for a long time. So let's go ahead and take a quick walk around. There's not much else done to it exteriorly. That's not a word, but on the outside, you know, everything else is about the same, but I think she is pretty much done. A lot of people asked me if I was going to get the HFP body kit for this car, and honestly, I'm not really planning on it. I don't really particularly care too much for the way it looks on the facelift Accord Coupes. I think it looks better on the pre-facelift like the one I had before, and so it's also very expensive, so that's another reason I'm just not planning on getting it. But I think the car looks pretty good the way it is. The only other thing I would like to do exterior wise is do a full chrome delete, you know, so around the windows, on the front bumpers and stuff. I would like to wrap all that stuff gloss black, but the problem is I've contacted a few shops about doing that, and they all want to charge me a lot of money. So I know it's a lot of work and whatnot, but I just can't really afford to do that right now. So anyhow, that is the biggest change on the outside. Another thing that I planned, or actually, yeah, well, this was planned, so I guess we'll just go with that. But in the last video, I mentioned that I got some cheap eBay LEDs from my friend for the low beams. You know, he gave them to me for free, so I wasn't going to turn them down, and you know, they weren't the greatest thing ever, but again, they were free, so I ran them. But anyways, a while back, you know, I was looking in like the Accord group and the community and stuff, and I went ahead and purchased some Diode Dynamics SL1 LED low beams. And so if we pop the hood here, you can see that now we have, you know, quality LEDs. There is the driver down there. Of course, they're plug and play, nothing too special there, and they are freaking awesome. So obviously these LEDs, unlike a lot of Amazon ones, were designed specifically for this car, and you know, they make them for all different models, but they actually put the LED in a lab, use it in the headlight that the car they're designing it has, and you know, they tweak it, the location of the LEDs and whatnot, and get, you know, a nice factory looking clean cutoff, and also, you know, throw the light as far down the road as they possibly can. So I'll put in a picture of the output at night, but I think they are really awesome. They were about $150 off Diode Dynamics' website. I also have their reverse lights, and I've had those for a long time. So they also use, you know, really high quality components, you know, OE grade or better in terms of the actual parts they use to build the LEDs, and they also have a 3-year warranty, so I think they look really nice. They perform really nice at night, rather, I should say. So that is the main thing. Of course, under the hood, nothing else has changed. Still got my red engine cover. It's a little dirty under here, but you know, it's a car. I'll get it sorted eventually. You can still see my teen coilovers there, and yeah, there's nothing really different down here as far as that goes. So we'll go ahead and close that up. Again, I think the car is pretty much good the way it is, besides those other things that I mentioned that I wanted to do. I'll do another quick little walk around. Again, nothing else has changed. Still got the HFP wing, the red emblems. I did add a couple of stickers. You know, of course, I put my Instagram handle on there, and then Diode Dynamics sent me a new sticker with the SL1 LED, so I went ahead and added that to the list here. But yeah, everything else is the same back here. Still got the Borla exhaust and the Vibrant resonator. The eBay diffuser, I actually did put new screws in it, and so before it had just, you know, bare metal screws, and they ended up rusting, and so that looked kind of crappy, but I went ahead and put some black painted screws on there so it doesn't look quite as bad anymore. But yeah, guys, that's about it for the exterior. Let's go ahead and hop inside. So hopping inside here, you can see the interior looks wise is pretty much the same. It's a little dirty again because it's winter and weather keeps being crappy around here, but yeah, haven't really done anything appearance wise in here either. I'll go ahead and start up the car. So as you can see, we are sitting at 48,488 miles. Of course, I've driven this car to Texas and back 3 times now, and so that's where a lot of the miles came from. But we are closing in on 50K, not even 2 years into owning this car, so that's pretty good. You know, I just changed the oil recently, you know, a few hundred miles ago, so we're good there. And yeah, everything else is about the same in here. Still got the carbon fiber wrap center console, which is holding up pretty decently. No complaints there. There are 2 things I feel like I should mention, and for this I'll go ahead and close the door. So the first thing I want to mention, I only have 2 real long-standing complaints with this car, and the first one is going to be related to the infotainment system. Now, this infotainment system is based on Android 4.2. It's a lot better than what we got in the 13 to 15 model year cars. However, it does still tend to have some issues, and I don't know if that's related to it running Android or not, but Yeah, so basically what happens is this car has CarPlay and Android Auto integrated, and so I use CarPlay all the time because I have an iPhone and whatnot. And so I've found that sometimes, especially when I was taking long road trips, or in a situation where I wasn't able to stop the car all the time, the radio would either disconnect and show this screen here, as if a phone is not connected to it, or it would just completely glitch out. And so those things I found very, very annoying, and I was putting up with that for months, and it was not getting any better. And so I went ahead and talked to a couple of my friends, and they said to just do a hard reset on the radio, which means basically you just go under the hood and pull the radio or audio fuse for 10 minutes and plug it back in and see what happens. Now, I don't want to jinx it because it could happen again, but since I've done that, it's not acted up, and so that's good. But I'm hoping that it continues to stay that way, because that was super infuriatingly annoying, like I said, especially on long, like cross-country road trips. With that said, yeah, that's my one complaint. And my second complaint refers to the seats. These are leather seats. They're just not all that comfortable after a lot of driving. And so, I've driven this car across the country from California to Texas and back like 3 times now, and so I have a lot of experience being in this car for all freaking day. So the thing with the seats is, they're not terrible, but again, they're not that comfortable. Especially I find that after about 4 or 5 hours of sitting in there, I just feel my lower half just go completely numb, and I'm really sore. And so I have to get out and stretch for a bit and whatnot. That's pretty typical for a road trip, but I've ridden in other cars that have more comfortable seats, is what I'm trying to say. Again, they're not terrible, they're not like cardboard, but they are kind of hard, and they don't have a ton of cushiness to them. And so that's something that I continue to have a small complaint about with this car. But other than that, I like being in here. I've always liked this interior layout and whatnot. Like I said, it's been a good, reliable car for the past 48,000 miles. So yeah, with that said, let's go ahead and take it out on the road. So, after 2 years, what is it like to own this Accord? Well, it's been pretty great. Honestly, I don't really have too many long-standing complaints, a couple of which we'll go into in just a second. But it's been a great car. I really enjoy driving it. I don't think I would really prefer to have any other car than this one, to be honest. The only other car I was thinking about getting when I purchased this car was the Lexus GS 350, but the thing was a little bit north of my price range, even in the used market. And even though I work at Lexus, it still would cost a little bit more to own, buying parts and such. And so I ultimately decided to just go with the car that I originally wanted from the start, the Accord Coupe. And it's been pretty awesome. Like I said before, we have 48,400 miles-ish on here. Another thing that I'd like to mention is that, of course, I have a couple of settings configured with K-Tuner. Namely, the first thing is I went ahead and disabled variable cylinder management. And so these V6 automatic Accords have a thing called variable cylinder management, where if you're on the highway or in low load situations, it will turn off one bank of cylinders. So it'll essentially be a 3-cylinder in low load situations. And honestly, I don't really particularly care for the way that feels when you're driving it. It's not like a huge, you don't really feel it a ton, but I did. And also because I have an exhaust, it also obviously changes the exhaust note of the engine, and it just kind of just decreased the responsiveness just a little bit. And so I decided to go ahead and disable that. And then the other thing I did is K-Tuner has an option in their software for this thing called Quick Shift, and basically I guess it just tightens up the shifts of the transmission. I guess it just shortens the engagement of the clutch packs or something. I don't really know exactly how it works, but the result is you get slightly faster shifts. And so those are the only 2 things I've done with it, and of course the 2-step, but that's not really useful in the real world. And those things have made a difference. And so I feel that, like I said, even with an automatic, I feel this car is pretty fun to drive. Now, that's a question I get a lot, given that I have always owned manual cars in the past. And that question is, do I regret getting the automatic do I miss having a manual transmission, etc., variations of that question. And honestly, my short answer for you is not really. This is my first automatic car. I'm not really missing the third pedal all that much. Of course, part of that could also be because I'm in California and we have a lot of traffic around here, and I've kind of grown accustomed to being lazy in stop and go traffic. So that's one thing. And, you know, the other thing is sometimes I just don't really feel like shifting. You know, I've been driving manual since I was 16, and I'm 22 now. So spent a lot of years driving, and for a daily, you know, it's not that big a deal to have an automatic. This car doesn't really feel any less fun to drive, in my opinion, just because it has a 6-speed automatic. And of course, these Honda automatics, I don't want to say they're manual transmissions, they're not even close, but the internal construction is very similar to what you would find in a manual transmission. Of course, it just has a torque converter instead of clutch, but the general construction is similar to a manual. So I don't know if that also has something to do with it. I also do have paddle shifters, so you know, if I do want to manually select gears, I can still do that. Of course, these aren't as responsive or nearly as fun as having a clutch. Now, there is something to note with this automatic. This car really does not like first gear in any scenario. So even if you have it in sport or manual mode with the paddle shifters, if you accelerate, and if you're not absolutely flooring it, if you accelerate, it will shift up to second gear at the earliest possible opportunity, no matter what. And it also will not let you downshift to first gear if you're driving any faster than about 22, 23 miles an hour, somewhere in there. So, you know, that is concern for some people. Of course, when I drove my manual cars, I never really used first gear all that much anyways. I know people complain about this because they can't, you know, launch the car from a stop really hard and it's all this other stuff, but I'm not a racer, you know, I never did that. Even when I did have manual cars, I would always downshift or upshift to second, you know, after about 10, 15 miles an hour, no matter what. So to me, it's not really a big deal, but to you, it may be a concern. So that's just kind of something I felt like mentioning for the people that, you know, are considering getting this car with the automatic. Other than that, I mean, those are really the only two things I felt like mentioning. Otherwise, again, this car drives really awesome. I mean, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't really have too many long-standing complaints other than the ones I mentioned before. So that's about it. I'm just sitting in traffic here, so I guess I'll end the video here. But I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a driving portion for this update video. And with that said, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.